boys and girls. Today's learning target is I can figure out how many things are in an array by using skip counting or repeated adding. Basically, we're going to be adding up and figuring out how many things are in arrays by figuring out how arrays work. So that's our first step. A rectangular array is when you arrange equal parts into a rectangular shape. So here's an example. You can see it's shaped like a rectangle, but there are equal size squares that make this shape. So as you're looking at this one, think about how many squares are in this array, and then think, well, how many long or how many across is the array? Then try and figure out how many tall is the array. Pause the video if you need more time to figure that out. So, important things to know about arrays is that they're organized into rows and columns. First, let's talk about rows. Rows go across the array. Think about when you sit in rows at a classroom or a movie theater or something like that. I drew green lines to show you the rows. This array has 2 rows. Here's a picture of chairs in rows at a stadium. You can see as they go across, that's a row. There are a lot of rows in this picture. Columns, on the other hand, they go up and down the array. Those are the blue lines. So this array has 3 columns. If you need help remembering which way columns go, think about columns that hold up a building. These are also called columns, and they go up and down, just like in the array. A really important thing about a rectangular array is that in every row, there is the same number of things. Or in every column, there's the same number of things. So in this array, all the rows have 3 squares. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And in this array, all the columns have 2 squares. Each column is 2 squares tall. 1, 2. 1, 2, and 1, 2. If you have an extra, it is not a rectangular array. For it to count as an array and to work for our math problems, you have to have the same number in each row and the same number in each column. So now we're going to do a quick array story problem. In this problem, Rob's team has shelves for their baseball hats. The question we're trying to figure out is how many hats are there in all? So first, let's imagine it in our heads and make sense of what's going on. What's the problem about? Well, it's about hats organized on shelves. What are we trying to figure out? That was in the problem right here. How many hats in all? So we want to figure out how many hats all together. And what information is important? Well, since we're learning about arrays, it's probably going to be important to think about rows or columns. Now, in a moment, you're going to pause the video and try and solve this problem. We're trying to figure out how many hats there are in all. Grab a piece of scratch paper as you do it and just record your thinking so that you can share your work at our meeting later. You can even try and solve it a different way if you can think of a second way to solve it. When you're ready, press play and I'll take you through a strategy that would work for this problem. Now let's think through a strategy together. This might actually be the same way you solved it, or maybe you did it a different way. So when I started solving this problem, first I needed to double check that it actually was an array. So I asked, well, okay, does each shelf have the same number of hats? Yeah, it looks like it. Well, then how many hats are on each shelf? 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 hats on each shelf. Then I got curious about how many shelves are there. 1, 2, 3 shelves. So I can imagine the line under each hat is like a shelf. And then we have 4 hats on each shelf. So let's write 4 next to each shelf, like that. You can see this as a shelf of 4, a shelf of 4, and a shelf of 4. Now that we know there's 4 hats on each shelf, we can write an equation to figure out how many hats there are in all. 4 plus 4 plus 4. That would give us how many altogether. The math word for the answer to a problem like where we're adding is the sum. So we want to figure out the sum of 4 plus 4 plus 4. Well, when I solved this, I know that 4 plus 4 is 8, and then I can count 4 more to get the answer. Okay, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 hats in all. On the previous page, those hats were organized in an array, and we learned that arrays have rows and columns. Here's the same array made out of dots instead of hats. There's still 3 rows, just like those 3 shelves, and each one has 4 on it, just like there were 4 hats on each shelf. We labeled that each row had 4 dots and each column had 3. Remember, in an array, every row has the same number of objects and every column has the same number of objects. Okay, that's almost the end of this video. At our meeting today, we're going to be working with arrays, so you'll need to bring something to make into arrays. Before you come to the meeting, find 15 small things that you can move around to show your math thinking. This is very similar to what we did last week. It can be small foods like pieces of cereal, little toys like Legos. It can be coins or buttons or anything like that, as long as it's small. If it's much bigger than a piece of cereal or a coin, that's a little too big for this activity. It'd be distracting and it'd be hard to move around quickly. When you come to the meeting, have your 15 things with you so you're ready to go. That's all for now. See you in the next video.